Well, thank everyone for joining us today. This is Rachel speaking. You're going to hear from a couple other people, and I'll make sure to introduce them as well. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about bidding, highlight one of our success stories with Fungi Games, as well as talking you through the essentials of app bidding, the things that you really need to know before getting started with bidding. You'll hear from one of our partner engineers as well. So wanted to just quickly introduce everyone here. You're going to be hearing from Alfred Fung, who's the founder and CEO of Fungi Games and one of the North America Audience Network ambassadors, as well as myself. I'm a sales account manager on the Audience Network team based out of the San Francisco office, as well as Zabi Losada, who is a partner engineer on the Audience Network team as well, also based out of our San Francisco office. So we'll talk through a little bit about sort of the background of bidding, giving you a little bit more context into bidding as a technology. Zabi is going to do a deep dive on the integrations between client side and in-house. And then as well, we're going to hear from Alfred, who's going to kick things off with us once we go through a quick summary on bidding around his experience with the bidding integration, what Fungi Games has done to utilize a hybrid monetization model, as well as giving you just some general background and let you guys hear what the experience was like directly from our publishers. So I'll kick things off really quickly with just a quick background on bidding in general. And before we dive into the steps of bidding, I'd like to take a step back here and underscore really why bidding is important and why it matters. At Audience Network, we believe that bidding creates a more fair and open and efficient ad ecosystem that benefits advertisers, publishers, and people. We recognize that this is something that we're seeing a shift in the industry for, moving away from that manual and sort of archaic waterfall method. Just to give you guys some direct insight into what this looks like from the publisher perspective, we're going to have Alfred Fung, again, who is the founder and CEO of Fungi Games, talk through his experience with bidding, highlighting the case study that we put together with Max Ads. And I will kick things off to Alfred.
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Alfred Fung. I am, as Rachel mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of Fungi Games. I know she was pronouncing it Fungi, and it's totally cool. There's a lot of ways of pronouncing our company name. We happen to call it Fungi Games. We are actually the game designers, developers, and we self-publish a game called House Flip. It's one of the top home renovation simulation games in Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store. To date, I started the company about 5 years ago. I've been in the mobile game space since 2010. If you think about the context of 2010, the Apple's App Store had only been live for about a year. So kind of one of the early folks looking at how to monetize and drive users into games in the early days. And so my personal background was very much in the monetization space. My first company that I was with largely drove a lot of monetization through advertising, and so I actually had a great deal of exposure, sitting in JSON requirements, knocking out ad placements in our games, and basically playing with waterfalls and swapping out who was going to be at the top or the middle or the bottom of an ad mediated waterfall. But how that ultimately coalesces into Fungi, we've been around for about 5 years now. House Flip itself, it is our only game that's currently live. It's been in the app stores on iOS for Christmas will be our 2-year anniversary, and Android has just been live since July 4th of last year. So the game is relatively new. In terms of the game itself, if you can imagine a house flipping game or home renovation game, there's basically two primary drivers in our meta for house flip. The first one is kind of like a tycoon element that players are kind of growing their capital, trying to become more profitable in how they flip houses. And then the second piece of the meta is kind of just the skill progression, becoming more powerful in the game. In effect, House Flip is an RPG game, but instead of wizards and warriors fighting a dragon, it's landscapers and interior designers trying to tackle, a Spanish style house or a Cape Cod home. So In the time that we've been live, we certainly have tested a lot of different ways of monetizing. We have strong fundamentals when it comes to game design, and we're always thoughtful on on monetization. While the majority of our monetization does come from in-app purchases, we're quite deliberate in making the game design very democratic in terms of giving our players a lot of different ways of consuming our game content. And one of those ways is basically folks can watch rewarded videos. And that is actually the only ad placements that we currently run in Houseflip. And so what you can imagine in terms of doing any type of renovation, just like in real life, it takes time. And so we have timers in the game, and basically folks can watch a rewarded video. They could choose to watch a rewarded video to accelerate those timers so that they can progress faster, and or they can actually accelerate the authors on the films that ultimately this. So what I can do is I can share a little bit about the challenges and solutions and results of our integration with AppLovin's Max Ads. Facebook Audience Network has been a crucial partner. As Rachel had mentioned, we are an ambassador in North America for FAN, and I'm incredibly honored to be able to speak a little bit more about our integration. So Rachel, if you can move to the next slide, I could jump right in. So as I'd mentioned, Houseflip has been around just for a little bit over a year and a half on iOS and a bit over a year on Android. We've tried a lot of different solutions, from self-mediating to using other mediated platforms. And the promise of header bidding, or just a general bidding network, really appealed to us when we had these conversations with AppLovin's team. And so I think the challenge, for a small team, we're only 12 people, and Houseflip, we're approaching 12 million downloads in a pretty short amount of time. We're 4.5 stars in most of the countries we've distributed in, and over 200,000 reviews in the app stores. So the quality is there, but when it comes to a 12-person team managing monetization, a lot of our folks are focused on game design, and they're focused on QA, or they're doing marketing, or they're the engineers. And so a big challenge is just kind of managing what used to be kind of a waterfalling system, where we would have to manually shift between different networks. And the main takeaway in terms of having a lot of networks, or rather the benefit to you as a publisher, whether you're just a utility app or a game publisher, is that by having a diversity of different networks, you're basically diversifying your portfolio of ad inventory that your users, your consumers, your customers ultimately can consume. And so from a UX or usability standpoint, it actually benefits you as a publisher to have as many networks in your quote unquote stack to be able to show your customers, hey, is it going to be another game that you're advertising? Is it going to be a utility app? Is it going to be a movie release that's coming out? And so by having as many ad networks in a mediated platform, i.e. in what we would call a mediated stack, it certainly benefits you as a publisher, because you're ultimately providing a better user experience. You're ultimately maximizing the eCPMs. You're maximizing the dollars per thousand views in which you're showing your users. And so ultimately the challenge is, how do you as a publisher, or someone, a PM sitting behind in his or her space or cubicle, to decide who should get that top placement, who gets that second, who gets that third. And that actually used to be my job when I first started in the industry. And so ultimately the challenge is, how do you make it so that you don't have to manage it on such a precise basis? How can you make it so that it's a little bit more automated? How do you make it so that you're not beholden to an eCPM that Pepsi or Dr. Pepper comes in and says, hey, we want a full takeover for that day, how do you manage that manually, especially when there's technology constraints, there's time delays, and so ultimately, when we have these conversations with AppLovin's Max Ads team, we actually initially started working with them as a purely waterfall system. We then said they basically said, look, we have a number of preferred partners, Facebook Audience Network being one of them. Would you be interested in kind of A/B testing, trying a hybrid setup, seeing whether or not you can compare how your eCPMs measure up, and ultimately how does your average revenue per daily active user, or ARPDAU, translate into benefits of testing between the two? And so the solution ended up being this mediated network called Max Ads from AppLovin, and kind of testing that, and we're at Fungi and Houseflip, we're quite ambitious as a company. We not only have um, an um, an appetite, or rather, we not only have an expectation for risk, we have actually a very strong appetite for risk. And so when we saw this and we saw, hey, like this could be a solution by which we won't have to manage this on the day-to-day. We can basically give our advertisers the ability to bid at the highest bid that they want to capture our inventory, so that they're ultimately paying the market rate that they're willing to pay. So in a kind of pure economic model, the advertisers ultimately benefit because they are the ones that are saying, hey, like, I'm Pepsi, I have this budget, I'm willing to pay a $65 eCPM to capture house flips inventory. By having a header bidding system through Max Ads, and let's say Pepsi happens to be advertising through Fan, they basically get to win that auction by being in by through this system. And so ultimately, when we ran this A/B test between what Max has always had in existence in a waterfall, and then trying their header bidding with a handful of folks, we just saw a tremendous lift in our eCPMs and ultimately our ARPDAUs as a result. And I think if you look at that results piece, that percentage lift, that 25% lift is it was not surprising. I think we kind of suspected that it would be strong, but a bigger piece, and something that we've kind of touted with other publishers in the industry has been that it's allowed us to save time, that we're not carving out time to swap ad networks within a waterfall. We're kind of able to just like set it and forget it, especially for a 12-person company with constrained resources. Like, it basically allows us to focus those very resources to the things that we do really well, like game design, focus on other forms of monetization, other opportunities to reach our players, marketing, and the engineering piece. So ultimately, Houseflip, we believe that even though we are one of the leaders in the home renovation game space, we feel like we're building this brand, and by having a democratic process by which players can access the gameplay, they ultimately get to intake all the content, whether through in-app purchases or through rewarded video. And the Max Ads solution ultimately does help us with Facebook Audience Network really stepping up and being one of the leaders in terms of in terms of a monetization partner. So I won't read you my own quote, but it certainly was smooth, and really it's allowed us to focus our efforts on the other parts of the business, while still at the same time monitoring and making sure that if there are other opportunities, still having a hybrid system still allows us to, like, hey, if there is some folks that really want to kind of dominate outside of header bidding, we can still kind of capture that today. So I think that covers it on my side. Hopefully what I've shared is helpful. I understand that there may or may not be some QA at the end, time permitting, but we're a very transparent company. It's just part of our culture and who we are. That being said, I'll turn this back to Rachel, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to enter it into the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alfred. As you mentioned, definitely we'll be taking questions, so feel free to enter those into the chat box, and we'll make sure to cover those at the end. Cool. So now that you've had the opportunity to hear from a publisher who has already gone through the integration process and highlighted some of those results, I wanted just to dive back into sort of why we're even talking about bidding and sort of where this has come from, and then I'll kick it over to Zabi to talk through what that actual integration process looks like. So for those that you may or may not be super familiar, but all of you have probably worked with Waterfall Stack before. This has pretty much been the standard setup for the last decade or so in terms of filling ad inventory. As you probably know, in waterfall mediation, all the ad networks or demand sources are given the opportunity to serve an ad for a specific impression in order of a average historical price. Most of the mediation platforms we work with as a demand source are typically looking at the last 24 hours of data in terms of what they are averaging on a CPM perspective. What that means is that this is data that is at least 24 hours old, and so that is not being done in real time, and you don't have the ability as the publisher to make the best judgment call in real time in order to actually decide what network is creating the highest amount of CPM or value for that specific impression. As you can see here in this example, because network 1 was at the top of the waterfall, which was either done based on historical CPMs or maybe a manual first look impression, with a $3 CPM, that was the network that won because of that top position, and they won that impression with the price of $3. Network 4, though, however, was actually willing to pay $5 for that specific impression, but since their average historical price is lower than what that top network was, they never even get to see that ad request. In this example, it's pretty clear to see that the publisher left money on the table. And this is something that we are moving away from as we're working with bidding technologies, and as Alfred mentioned, also working with publishers who are developing some type of hybrid monetization model. Enter bidding. So essentially what bidding is solving for in the most simplistic terms is all demand sources are bidding for each impression in real time, which means essentially the highest price always has the chance to win. In this example, network 4 would win the impression at $5. And so by creating this true competition and allowing for this impartial auction to occur, the publisher is receiving the best price and the true value for their impression. App bidding, we understand, is certainly not going to replace waterfalls overnight, but we believe that bidding will provide significant benefits to app publishers and will become the de facto methodology. So effectively, what does replacing waterfalls with bidding ultimately mean for app publishers like yourself? Firstly, the obvious one is revenue or more money. When every demand source is bidding in an open and fair auction, you're going to see more competition for your inventory. This increased competition means better prices for every single impression. Secondly, bidding provides operational efficiency. As we heard from Alfred, it is something that you'll probably experience as you're going through this process, is you'll no longer have the need to continually optimize a cumbersome and often complex waterfall. Instead, your team can focus their time on projects that drive more impact for your business, whether that be user acquisition, new features, new app launches, etc. And finally, more demand. Bidding gives you easier access to more demand sources with minimal effect on latency. This fundamentally should change the way ads are selected and delivered through apps, which means that your technology as a publisher and your operations can have to undergo a shift before bidding can fully be implemented. And now I will kick things off to Zabi to talk through what that integration actually looks like.
Thanks, Rachel. So the first step is to choose the best integration option for your business. To maximize the benefits of app bidding, the first step is to properly manage the initial setup. Monetization solutions are never one size fits all, so it's important to integrate bidding in the way that fits the unique needs of your business. So today, we support app bidding in two ways, through in-house integration and through partner integration. In-house integration is for publishers who build their own mediation stack in-house. Partner integration is for publishers who use third-party mediation. They rely on third-party mediation to monetize their applications. Audience Network works with a number of third-party mediation partners, so publishers who mediate with this platform can integrate Facebook demand in real time. In-house publishers are those who build a mediation ad stack themselves. They tend to have well-resourced developer teams and want a high level of customizability and control. That means that these publishers have to build their own mediation stack. So usually they have their own DevOps team, their own AdOps team that has to manage the mediation stack in Waterfall and integrate it with bidding. In in-house integration, we have two modes of working. The first one is client-side. That it means that the bid requests are sent from the application, are received in the application, and the auction, the decision of who is the winner, is taken in the application. The pros of this kind of integration is that are easier to integrate and maintain in a long term. We are providing the bidding kit. That is an open source software that allows to build this kind of bidding logic inside the application. And so it requires a little effort from the publisher to access to this real-time demand. The cons is that it relies in user device and potentially is less reliable network. What this means is that as we are performing the bid request and also deciding who is the winner from the application, the network conditions are going to affect the latency. For example, if we are in a 2G network and we are trying to reach all the different bidders, probably depending on the region, they are going to have a lot of timeouts. So to solve these issues, we also support server-side bidding. In this case, the bidding requests are sent from an in-house server hosted in the publisher network, and the auction, the decision who is the winner, is taken there. The pros is that it doesn't necessarily require client updates to make changes, as we are doing these changes in the server, and also allows you to use the server resource and network. Cons is that you probably need a specific team inside your company that is able to build this solution and maintain it. On the other hand, we have partner integration that make it quite easy to integrate with different bidders in a record time. These are the networks that we are currently working on, and if you want to try to test it, please reach out, and we will start the process to make bidding available for you. So the partner integration allows you to only implement one of the SDKs, that is, for example, AdMob or Max, and with this you are going to have the access to different bidders. One is, for example, Facebook. What are the considerations that we have to integrate with a partner? First of all, they require to have a principal auction. So everybody, all the bidders, so the auction must be clear, unalterable, fair, and choose winners based on the highest price. Second condition is access. Every bidder has to be called at the same time. So every network bidding has the opportunity to participate in the auction and give the highest price. And the last one is the transparency. We expect fair actions, and we want to verify that the highest price is always winning, and we don't have different conditions that can affect to the publisher revenue. The second step is to establish the auction density. As Alfred mentioned, it's really important to have different ad networks competing in bidding. So, for example, this is the case that, with demand and supply, was if you have more demand, the price are going to increase. So for Facebook, at least for us, we consider that at least 3 networks are required to have good results in video. And also that all bidders have to be called for every impression. This means that, for example, if Facebook is your only bidder and Facebook is already winning a lot of opportunities, you are not going to see a huge change in your ARPDAU. But if, for example, you have more networks, the network that was always winning these opportunities is going to lose in some of the cases when the second or the third network has demand to pay higher for these higher CPMs for this opportunity. The third step is to build a smart hybrid setup. So we understand that publisher set of wallet are not only based in networks that support bidding. So for these other networks that we expect that are going to support bidding in a really soon, you have to keep we have to maintain the waterfall. So in this diagram, we can see when we have the opportunity to get an impression, in parallel we run a real-time auction and a waterfall. In the waterfall, we go network by network, and we choose the one that has the first field. And in bidding, we just get the bid from the highest network. In the end, we compare the average CPM of the network that filled the opportunity with the winner from the auction. And this is the one that will provide the highest CPM for this specific opportunity. So wrapping up, one of the things that we suggest in bidding is remove the price floors, because we are already paying based on the demand that we have and the user. So we only need one call. So we accept auction floors, but not price floors, as we support in Waterfall. Second is don't call the same network twice. If a network is already participating in the auction through their bidder, it's not fair to add them also in the waterfall, because the same network is going to be competing for the same opportunity. It's going to give the same price, and in the end, it's going to increase the latency to get an ad and affect the user. Third one is request ad only for the winner. So if you have multiple bidders participating in the auction, only request the ad for the one who won this opportunity. If you want to get another ad, the best practice is to run another auction so the bidder can compete again between them. After an auction finishes, you should send a win or loss notification reporting to the network what is the result of the auction. In case of partner integration, this is already implemented by them, so you don't need to worry. So this only affects in-house integrations. By the end, as I mentioned before, the winner of an auction, the winner of an opportunity has to be the waterfall placement with the highest CPM, but with already filled the opportunity. And this is the one that you have to compare with.
Awesome. And I know that we're just about hitting time, but we're going to spend a couple more minutes with you guys today just to make sure we get through all this really valuable content. Thank you for sticking through it, and we should be wrapping up in the next couple minutes. We only have a couple more steps to walk you guys through. Well, so step 4, which is step 4 of 5, once you've actually gone through the integration, as Zabi has outlined, you've established the auction density, you've built that smart hybrid setup, it's time to actually test the performance of the app bidding and evaluate your success. The top 3 questions we typically hear from publishers who are looking to test bidding are: what kind of app should they test? What ad format should they test? And how can they accurately measure performance? So I'll walk you through each of these. So firstly, what type of app should you be testing? The answer really is any kind of app, as long as it has an existing stable metrics and a significant volume of impressions. Our recommendation is not to test bidding on an app you've just launched or plan to upgrade soon, or an app that's undergoing a marketing push. By testing on an existing app that has stable performance metrics, you can then use A/B testing to correctly attribute the results of the integration of bidding. Also, the app you test should be one that receives enough impressions to give you an adequate amount of data to evaluate. We recommend at least 100K total impressions per day. Next, what formats should you test? As we heard both from Zabi and Alfred, ideally you should be testing with higher performing formats such as native, interstitial, or rewarded video. You're going to see more success with bidding if the formats you test also have impressions that are distributed amongst multiple ad networks. And then how do you measure performance? This is probably the most important part of this. The types of tests that you should use to measure bidding performance will also be dictated by the goals you have. A/B tests are best for publishers who want to see a certain percentage of revenue uplift before they make the decision to migrate to bidding. Since, of course, there's always outside variables, but there are less likely to influence outcome, A/B tests make it easier to learn the amount of revenue attributable to bidding. As A/B tests are more comprehensive, they can be complex and require higher setup costs and time to run. And the inverse of that would be the pre-post tests, which are best for publishers who have newly integrated bidding and want to make sure it's working smoothly within their systems. Since these tests don't split traffic, there is a greater risk for outside factors to influence the outcome. This makes pre-post tests unreliable for attributing revenue lift, but it's still useful for evaluating general performance before and after bidding is integrated. As a side note, most of the publishers that we work with do end up implementing some sort of A/B test in order to really isolate bidding to correctly attribute the amount of impact that's driving on their revenue. And the final step here is, how do you evaluate success with the metrics that matter? So after you've tested bidding, it's important to evaluate those performance metrics to understand really what sort of uplift revenue is driving for your business. A shift to app bidding requires a shift in the way success is evaluated. And since bidding fundamentally changes the way ads are selected and delivered, success cannot be correctly measured with metrics intended to evaluate waterfall mediation. Since waterfall mediation was introduced, network CPMs have been the de facto success metric, with fill rate and overall payout ratio as secondary measures. In a bidding environment, the key metric is average revenue per daily active user, or ARPDAU, which measures overall revenue but not performance by network. Evaluating success with bidding is simple. Look at the ARPDAU before bidding and compare it to the ARPDAU after implementing bidding. You may see that the CPMs of some networks decrease. This most often means the networks previously had access to only top value users due to a price floor or its position in the waterfall. With bidding, the network has now gained full access to all impressions and could be winning lower value users, which may negatively affect CPMs, but will positively impact ARPDAU overall. This is why it's important to remove price floors for bidding networks. They may increase CPMs, but they'll cause lost impressions and decrease overall ad revenue. I want to quickly highlight how app bidding improves efficiency here, which is another important measure of success. Bidding now allows teams to turn their focus away from managing a complex waterfall towards work that has more impact on their business. It essentially increases efficiency in three major ways. It makes it easier to access more demand, which is helping you increase competition for your inventory with minimal effect on latency and minimal impact on operational resources. It also makes the setup easier. Setting up and maintaining network placement IDs is labor intensive. The waterfall requires a minimum of 3 to 4 placement IDs per network. Multiply this by 5+ demand sources in a typical ad stack, and by the number of waterfalls maintained by various OS setups and country placements. With bidding, each network needs just one placement ID, which frees up significant resources. And finally, bidding makes evaluation easier. Because each bidding network needs just one placement ID, performance evaluation is much simpler. Even publishers who automatically optimize their waterfalls will increase efficiency with bidding. Waterfall rankings are based on past performance, as we've covered, whereas past performance is a result of what inventory the network had access to. When networks are given access to all inventory through bidding, publishers get a truer evaluation of each network's actual performance. We've covered a ton of information, and I want to make sure that I give you guys the tools for success moving forward if you're interested in actually going through and integrating with bidding. So as app bidding gains momentum, these are the things that you guys should be prepared for while you're going through this integration process. Here's your checklist for success, and we believe these are the key steps to a smooth transition and increase the likelihood of the success that you have with bidding. Firstly, choosing the best integration option for your business, whether that be in-house or working with a partner integration system. Secondly, Again, making sure that your auction has enough demand and working with enough demand sources to ensure that bidding is a meaningful increase of your revenue for your business. Third, building a smart hybrid setup. If you're already using Waterfall setup, understanding how to transition to a hybrid setup is really important for the success of your business. Again, testing the right app and the ad format with the method that matches your goals. And finally, evaluating success with the right metrics like ARPDAU.